All right, friends, it's time to give you loyal listeners a discount on protein powder. You may or may not know, but I launched my very first protein powder 2 years ago. It's a grass-fed beef isolate with only 3 ingredients: grass-fed beef, either organic cacao or organic vanilla, and organic monk fruit. Now, if you don't want any of the added flavor and sweeteners, you can also just get unflavored. And no matter what flavor you choose, you're getting over 23 grams of protein per scoop, which is going to keep you full and satisfied between meals. I love starting my day with a Fab4 smoothie and breaking my fast with that much protein. It makes a serious difference in my cravings and blood sugar balance the rest of the day, and I've seen it with my clients as well. Now, I never thought I'd own a product company, but when I got pregnant with Sebastian, I realized the majority of protein powders were chemically extracted or enzymatically extracted, and I wanted to use heat and water only. I wanted minimal ingredients because we don't need those emulsifiers, fillers, or added vitamins, minerals, and probiotics. All of those additions increase the chances that it's not going to work for your body, whether it be bloating, digestion issues. I just wanted pure, clean protein to keep you full and satisfied so you could build the most delicious Fab4 smoothie. And I have to say, I'm pretty proud of the flavor. If you take a look at our reviews on Amazon, you'll see 5-star reviews for flavor. And that is key, because if you don't love your Fab4 smoothie and you don't love drinking your protein powder, you're not going to do it. It won't become a habit, and it's consistency that outpaces everything. So if you're here and you're listening and you want to give our protein powder a try, use the code podcast5 for $5 off your order. And let me know if you love it. My favorite ways to apply this protein powder is in my Fab4 smoothie, making freezer fudge, making chocolate milk, making hot chocolate, and throwing the unflavored into all my kids' baked goods. So let me know how you use it. Let me know if you love it, and share this podcast deal with your friends. Hey, you guys, welcome back to the show. It's Friday. It's Friday, which means we're going to go into things that I'm interested in that may not be as mainstream, like human design. Today's guest is Erin Jones, and she went through my human design results with me just a few days ago. I had no idea what human design, I had no idea what it was. And it was majorly eye-opening to me and really, really interesting. So I wanted to bring her on the show to talk about what the heck is human design? What are the results? How are they applicable in real life? And how can you change your behaviors to really optimize your life based on your human design? So Erin, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be here.
Thank you for reaching out and for getting in touch with me, because since we talked last, I feel like everything in my life makes sense.
Makes me so happy.
Well, it's just, I think when it comes to birth time and astrology and human design, and I don't want to call them woo things, but I feel like it's out there in the solar system and I don't understand it. And it feels like anytime anyone's asked me for my birthday and given me results, I get a 30-page packet that I don't understand. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll tackle that when I have time. So yeah.
So I was just going to say, I think that the magic of human design, I know we'll talk more about it, but I think it's often not about telling people stuff they don't know. It's like stuff they so intuitively know about themselves, but they never given themselves permission to step into, So I think in our conversation, it wasn't like anything new to you. It was just like, oh, wow, that's just like such a language and a framework to understand myself. So I think that like it is woo-woo. It can feel so cosmic, but I think that I so appreciate the grounded and actionable and practical nature of human design.
Yeah. Well, let's start with how you got, before we jump into what is human design, let's start with like how you got involved with it and who are you working with and how is it applicable to helping people in their life?
Totally. So definitely not like a path that I would have predicted for myself. I think that I came from a background around startup and business, and I basically had worked with a lot of different companies and just observed a lot of dysfunction in the teams that I worked with. The visions were amazing, the people were amazing, but they just didn't seem to know how to work together. And I think my fascination was always in like just understanding what made people tick and like what was going on. And so I was always pursuing lots of different modalities just to understand myself and my own life. And In 2015, I live in New York, and I was sitting in New York, and a guy sat next to me, and he's like, "I'd love to look up your human design." I was like, "I don't know what in the world you're talking about, but fine." He basically pulled out his phone and looked at my design and started, similar to our experience, started reflecting back all these things to myself that felt like, oh my God, like no one has ever given me a language for that. But actually, unlike you, I was so living out of alignment with it. And I was like, I've never given myself permission to do any of that. And he ended the conversation and was like, and we're meant to work together. And like human design doesn't actually do that. It's not predictive in that way, but he saw so much compatibility in our design. So he kind of invited me in to build with him. And so I built a company with him for 2 years, focused exclusively on bringing human design into companies and into business, because I think that like that was my interest. And I was like, it's also so fun bringing it into companies because they're like, you want my birth information? And you talk to them about it and they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is so useful. This is so tactical. So, but I will say those first 2 years, like it didn't actually feel like anyone was ready for it. And we were just kind of like trudging through the mud, trying to make it happen. And in 2017, I was like, I got to give up. Like no one's ever going to be ready. And then basically in 2018, they were. And so I launched my own practice, and it's been like just a wild, roller coaster in the most beautiful way ever since. And so I no longer focus exclusively with on companies. So I work with a lot of individuals, but I also do work with teams as well, which has like such a special place in my heart, because even though it's still so like new to them, I like have been so astounded by how receptive and excited they've been.
Well, it's once you do it, I feel like it feels tangible. Before, when you're like, hey, let's talk about human design, I'm like, what is she talking about? Yes. So let's get to the nitty gritty. What is human design?
So human design is a system based on your exact time, date, and place of birth that basically gives you your energetic DNA. So what I mean by that is, how are you meant to make decisions and communicate and work within teams and cultivate relationships and digest food and all the things. And it basically just gives us a blueprint to it's like our operating manual. It's like we come into this life without an operating manual, and human design is like, here's the manual. And there are about 2 billion different configurations. So it really sheds light on our uniqueness and just gives us the tools to step into it. And then in terms of, what it draws from, it pulls from astrology, from Kabbalah, the I Ching, the chakra system. So basically it's kind of pulling all these different pieces from different systems to kind of give us that map to our own design.
So they basically took a accumulation of all of these modalities and pulled them together and said okay, let's give you a tactical approach or some understanding into who you are.
Yes, exactly.
So what are we went through them together, but what are some of the categories where we can start to learn about ourselves, or how is it broken down? And what we'll do is we'll put up my human design in the show notes so people can see the visual of what we're talking about.
Yeah, perfect. And before I go through them, I just want to share that the point of human design is not to believe it. You know what I mean? I'm never trying to convince people of anything. My boyfriend and business partner is a skeptic by nature. And so I think that it's more around is it helpful? And is it useful? So I just want to remind people when they listen, it's not oh my God, do I have to believe this thing? It's just it's a fun thing to play with. It gives us a language and it gives us tools to step into ourselves. So again, it's not really about believing, but more just is this actually useful in my own life? And so, like I said, there are 2 billion different configurations, but there are, of course, higher level distinctions. At the highest level in human design, there are 5 different types: manifesting generators, projectors, reflectors, and manifestors. With each of those types will come a strategy, kind of how you're meant to create opportunities for yourself. And we can go through those for sure. But some of the other aspects that I think are interesting to look at are authorities. That's basically how everyone's designed to make decisions. Our profile is kind of how we're here to manifest our own unique purpose. And then also, we have these things called open centers, which are basically the areas where we are the most sensitive to other people's energy, but also where we're here to kind of learn a lot of lessons. So really useful to be aware of. So those are often kind of the first pieces I recommend people diving into.
Great.
Do you want to talk about the types?
Let's go through the types.
Okay, cool. So you're a generator. So let me talk about manifesting generators and generators first. And I'll talk about them together and then separate. So basically manifesting generators. And also, I know it'll be in the show notes, but if you want to look up your design now, erinclairejones.com/lookup, just so you can kind of see what your type is.
Okay, great.
So manifesting generators are basically the ones that have the energy and the life force to kind of build and create and make things happen. Like they're kind of designed to wake up in the morning with a full tank of energy, to use up their energy in super satisfying ways and then kind of crash and wake up recharged. If they haven't fully exhausted their tank, they might go to bed and feel pretty restless or depleted because they just haven't even used up their energy in a way that feels good. And the more they're saying yes to things that uniquely light them up, like the more energy they will feel and the more they will uplift everyone around them. But the more they're kind of saying yes just because they think they should, because somebody asked, the quicker their battery drains. And so the difference between the two is that manifesting generators are very kind of multi-passionate. They love having their energy in a lot of things at once, not really meant to do just one thing. And they also move very quickly, but in doing so, they can like skip a few steps along the way. And so it's good to have the right support around them. Whereas generators are more about kind of mastery, like going really deep into something. And then when it's time, moving on. And so the strategy for both of these types is magnetism. The idea, I know we talked about this, but the idea is that you're not actually meant to chase after anything. Life is like really meant to come to you. And so your work is to keep your awareness open and see what shows up and see what activates your gut response. As soon as you have the response, you can go make something happen. So how did that resonate with you, and how does that resonate with you, the kind of generator piece and also the magnetism piece of not chasing after things?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about this a little bit on our call together when you went through my human design, but specifically like the generator piece and like going deep and feeling passionate about learning something and really going into it is there for me. Like that's like so much a part of, I think, the success of my business and just in general, how I learn. And, you know, and the crazy part is the things that derail me are exactly what you're talking about is, you know, if I'm in alignment with that and I'm really excited about something and I'm putting my energy into something that really makes sense for me, I could do it all day long. I could do 80-hour work weeks and not feel depleted. It is when I tend to be a little bit more of a, like a people pleaser, but saying yes to friends and trying to be supportive of friends and like other businesses and spreading myself thin in something that isn't my core, it definitely is depleting. And that's been a process for me over even like the last 10 years is learning to say no and taking a step back and saying, like, what is this really for? Who is this really for? And learning to be not like selfish, but learning to be a little bit more strategic around my business.
I love that. And I think that, you know, I'm glad you said selfish because I think that's what I always encourage generators and manifesting generators is knowing that like when you're so discerning about where you put your energy, it's like it actually allows you to like have the most impact in the world because like that's like the most uplifting thing. If you're just like saying yes and overcommitting, you're not going to really have that kind of uplifting, juicy kind of impact that you're meant to. And I think, you know, we all have lessons to learn around boundaries, but I find generators and manifesting generators do in particular because you have so much vitality and energy and life force, people can really want to take advantage of it. And not in like a malicious way. They're like, can you come to this thing? Can you do this thing? You know? And so for you just being like, am I lit up by the thing? No, I'm going to say no, you know, and obviously there might be some exceptions, but I know that we talked about also in the time of COVID, you maybe even felt a little bit more permission to like have those stronger boundaries and being like, I'm going to be in my own lane here.
Yeah, it's been the most explosive year for me by far, you know, and part of it is like, is it the tipping point of really being in this business since 2011, going back to school, but like really, you know, 2012 and looking at it now, we're in 2020 and people I'm sure will say like, oh, I want to do what you're doing and I want to do it right now. And I always want to remind people, this is like taken 8 years to get to this point where I'm able to put out courses, multiple books, products, have collaborations. Like it sort of is the tipping point, but I also like attribute so much of it to the pandemic and to the virtual life and the lack of social engagements. And I do feel really called to support my female friends and entrepreneurs and people that have supported me. And so when there aren't these events like on a Tuesday night or a Thursday at lunch, and I'm able to just like be in my zone and go deep the way that I like to go deep. I mean, to launch a Fab4 course, a pregnancy course, my journal, like get my protein powder finally out in the world, like, and have cool collaborations with companies like Williams-Sonoma. Like this has been after years of saying no to brands, after really trusting my gut, after really like holding my ground around like partnerships and never saying yes to anything I didn't feel good about. But But I think it really has to do with the time to like be in my vortex and being like you said, Mike, I talk about the vortex, that magnetism is like, if you're doing what you're meant to do, it's almost like you're being sucked down the tunnel. It's not going to feel like as much effort, and it feels like effort in the beginning always. But like, if you continue to like I feel like if you continue to stay true to yourself, and the gut thing really just checks out for me, because I can make a decision on something very quickly. And Chris is like, but why? Like, just feel it in my body? Question mark? Like, I don't know. It just feels right. And, I love science to back things up, but then at a certain point, you just like, the green light or the red light is based on the fact that like, am I ready to do this right now? Like I am or I'm not.
And just for context, like in human design, which we might talk about, there are lots of different ways of making decisions. So for Kelly, it's all about her gut response in the moment, super visceral, not a thing that she can explain. This thing feels right or it doesn't. Like I've got to sleep on things. I've got to feel into things. Some people have to talk things out. So again, it just kind of like identifies what our unique one is. And I know we'll talk about your design a little bit later, but just like a few things that come up just based on what you shared before we keep going on is like, one of my favorite channels that you have is the strength of conviction, where you're just like, I'm going to just like follow my own convictions, even if they make no sense to anyone else. And the idea is that when you do that, you basically like empower everyone around you to kind of get in touch with their own convictions and follow their truth too. And so like you have such tremendous impact when you're like, I'm going to just persevere and do my thing. And everyone's like, oh my God, I can like do the same thing for me. So it just feels like you're doing that so beautifully. So it's cool to hear that. And, Kelly's very independent in her design. So it feels like the time of COVID has been like allowed you to just be in your own flow and not be like disrupted or having to be more collaborative, and it's natural to you. So I love that. So the next type is projectors. So projectors are basically the ones that are here to kind of be the leaders, the guides, the advisors, the teachers, not here to do all the doing. And because we live in a world primarily of generators and manifesting generators, we're basically always trying to keep up as projectors. We're like, I've got to do more and do more. And so much of being a projector is knowing that your gift is really in your perspective, your ability to guide other people, your ability to ask questions, and not in your ability to do. And so learning how to like honor the ebbs and flows of your energy. I think as a projector with a generator partner, it's been a real lesson for me. It's like even we'll like land in a new city and he's like, let's go explore. And I'm like, oh my God, I've got to lay down for 4 hours. I'll see you later, but like not trying to keep up. And what I shared earlier about being fascinated with people, I think in general, projectors love systems. They love anything that helps them understand people because their role is really in guiding other people. And so the strategy for projectors is basically waiting for a sense of recognition and invitation in terms of like, who you're working with, who you're partnering with, who you're living with. I think when I first discovered that, I was like, I have to wait for an invitation for everything that feels so passive as an entrepreneur. And so I would just remind the projectors that your job is basically to make yourself visible, to like let people know that you exist and share about what you do in a really broad way and let the right people come to you.
So good. It's exactly what you did. And here you are on the podcast.
Exactly. And I'll also say like the first iteration of my human design company, I was like pitching specific companies, and I was just like, I want to work with you. And it was just like never working out. And I think that I basically this time around made it my job, like to just like share. You know what I mean? And like a really broad way. And like, when I do reach out to people, it's like, I exist. You know what I mean? I'm here if you want me, if you have any kind of response. And I just think that it's been so much more successful and natural for me than anything else I've done. And so important for projectors to kind of step into this and ask yourself, where do you feel the most recognized and invited in? And can you funnel more energy into those places? And then any questions on that? Or should I talk about manifestors?
No, that's super interesting because it's funny. You're a projector and you're making yourself available. And I'm like just waiting for you to show up.
Isn't that funny?
I'm just kidding. I mean, it's just really interesting because, obviously, I could be in my own little research tunnel or down a rabbit hole. And it's just interesting to learn more. And it's interesting to understand people's dynamics because, like you said, people learn how to work together better. They're on the team together to be recognized more, to all of those things. So it's cool. I'm curious about the other two.
Yeah, amazing. And it's just like, it's such a reminder that we all need each other and we all operate so differently. I think that we talked in our session about how for you, it's really good to respond to things. Have people give you kind of options. It's like, do you want to do this or this? You like this or this? Like projectors like are here to like ask questions, give you things to respond to, so you can just like see how that collaboration can be so useful. And like, I'll never say that like collaborations are not possible, but I will say in the context of business, projectors and generators tend to be like a very powerful one, just because they bring such different energy to the table. And then we have manifestors. So manifestors are basically the ones that are here to just like initiate and get things started. They're like really here to kind of get the ball rolling. They don't really need any confirmation or any permission before they do. Often manifestors need a lot of freedom, autonomy, and control. They're really not here to be told what to do or managed or guided in any way. So they can often struggle a little bit in like, corporate environments if they're like being confined or being like told what to do. So they often are very entrepreneurial when they're kind of doing their own thing or when they're just given freedom. It's like, this is your domain. Do what you please. Let us know how it goes. And often they're pretty comfortable with solitude and just like being left alone to do what they please. A reminder for manifestors is that while you're here to initiate, you're not always here to do all the doing yourself. So kind of knowing when to hand things off and knowing that your energy does operate in spurts. The strategy for manifestors is basically about initiating, so making the first move and just like going on their own way and kind of waiting for people to follow, but also about informing. And what I mean by that is like if they don't communicate to the people around them what they're going to do before they do it, people can become very resistant. But if they just like let them know what they're going to do before they do it, not asking for permission, just giving them a heads up, they'll find so much more ease in their life. Super simple example. I have a client whose husband is a manifestor and like he'll just like leave the room and won't say anything to their 2-year-old son, and the son will like freak out. But like when he like leaves the room and he's like, I'm leaving the room, I'm going upstairs, the son's like, okay, and so much more relaxed. So just like if you're a manifestor, really considering, are you kind of keeping the people around you informed of what you're choosing and when? And do you notice a difference when you do versus when you don't? And I'll also remind you that it's not natural. It's just a tool that's probably going to make your life easier.
Yeah.
So useful to know when you have manifestors on your team, because how they're going to need to be managed is totally different than any projectors or generators or manifesting generators.
Got it.
Clear?
Yep.
And then the final type is reflectors. Reflectors are 1% of the population, so much more rare. And these people are kind of our collective mirrors. These are people that are incredibly sensitive to their physical environment and basically always taking in everything in their space and magnifying it. So you really get a good sense of how a team is doing, a company is doing, a family is doing, just by how the reflector is showing up. So reflectors, it's so important to kind of be a very ruthless curator of who you're around and where you're around, because you're going to take in that space. But also know that you have such a gift in your perspective and the way that you see the world. And so making sure you're kind of in spaces where your perspective feels very invited in. And the last piece that I would share for reflectors is that like their gift is in the fluidity of who they are, not just being one thing. In your design, you've got a very strong sense of identity. Like, this is who I am. It might keep changing, but there's like the strong sense. Whereas reflectors, like they might like change day by day, place by place, week by week. And so much of the work is embracing the fluidity of who they are and not trying to put themselves into a box in any way.
Interesting.
So those are the types.
All right.
When you hear them all, do you still feel like you resonate most with the generator one?
Yeah, definitely. I would say the manifesting thing is interesting, like to be a manifester, but I tend to, I don't know, I think that I'm a manifester. I think before I even knew what human design was like, oh, I'm manifesting this. But I think I'm doing the work and gut checking and being like, this feels right. Keep going.
Totally.
And so it does resonate to me to be more of a generator than a manifesting generator or a manifester. Like as much as I'm like, those sound cool. Totally. I'm like, yeah, maybe that's not. I'm actually doing the work to get it done. I'm not just being like, this is what we're going to do,
Totally. And as soon as the gut response comes, you can just like go make the thing happen, but like that response is the thing that you're waiting for before you kind of go after it.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
So under each type, the 5 types, what are some of the main categories that people can learn about? And how can they use it in their life?
So the next layer that I would recommend is the authority. So it's basically how you make decisions. And I think this is part of the thing that like got me so excited about human design in the first place, because I was like, we're making decisions every day. You know what I mean? And it just like helps us enter into the right opportunities and relationships in the first place. So that one is so actionable because again, we're using it all the time, and none of us are really meant to make decisions from our mind. None of us are meant to create a pro-con list and like rationalize things, which is basically what so many of us have been conditioned to do. So do you want to talk about the authority ones?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So I know we shared about yours last week, but basically you are a sacral authority. That's what we call it in human design. And this is only possible for generators or manifesting generators. And it means that you are designed to make decisions based on your gut response in the moment. very visceral feeling in your belly. It's like an expansion, a rising of energy, a contraction. It's like an excited buzz, an uncomfortable nod. It can be like an in your voice, And if you're not getting a full bodied gut response towards something, it either means it is not the right thing or it's not the right time yet. And so like, if you're just like, it's not it yet. It's like maybe the next week you're like, oh my God, I'm in. My partner is really similar to you in this way. And he has this beautiful framework where he's like, it's either now or not now. You know what I mean? He's just like, it's not now. It's not now. And then the gut hits, he's like, it's time. Let's go, And it's really powerful to access that gut response that the people around you ask you very specific questions. So as we talked about last week, instead of being like, what do you want to eat for dinner? Or where do you want to go? Do you want to go here or here? Do you want to eat this or this? Like, if you're not getting a gut response, it might not be that you don't have a response. Like, you're just not actually being asked in the right way. And the last piece I'd share about this is that, one, your gut is never a thing that you can make sense of. So if you find yourself giving reason for decision, it's not your gut speaking. And two, there's so much, advice out there of like, follow your gut, listen to your gut. And we just don't all have that as our authority. And so that advice is so relevant and so perfect for you and totally irrelevant and super unuseful for me.
Okay.
So do you feel so connected to that gut response? Based on our conversation, it felt like you really were letting that be the authority. Is that true?
Yeah. And it's funny. I think when you took it a step further and explained, because we were joking on our call, when you went through my human design, is that some of the things that come up for Chris and I is that I'll be like, what do you want to eat for dinner? Or what are we doing this weekend? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't really care. Like my answer is so like vague and very almost like I seem like wishy-washy and indecisive, but that's not my personality at all. If he were to say like, hey, like, do you want to go take a yoga class first thing? Or, I mean, it's pre-COVID. Or do you want to go to the beach in Malibu? Pre-COVID.
Nice. Yeah.
I'd be able to be like, oh, I really feel like the beach, or I really need to move my body. Like I could make that decision in 30 seconds without an actual reason, or less, but it is super interesting because it's those little fights of like, they're not really even fights, but they're just like the indecision that he's like looking for. He's looking for me to make a decision. And it's funny because even since our call, I'm like, if you ever want me to do anything or make a decision, you just need to be really specific. So,
give me options. Give me something to respond to. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it just even happened the other night. He was just like, do you want this or this? And I was like, yeah, I want that. It's just, it's already helping.
I'm so glad to hear that. It's like, it is such a simple shift and such a big one. And you can imagine like, at work, it's really useful to know, in terms of who you're working with. It's like, okay, I need to give them options, or I need to invite them in, like knowing how to communicate with them. I think I'm remembering there was a team that I worked with recently where it's like the HR woman had this as her authority. And so basically when they're looking to hire somebody, she like immediately was like, yes, no, and then they would be like, why? And she's like, I don't know. It's just like, I know that we're going to regret it if we say yes. And so that's why it's so cool with teams to kind of help cultivate that trust, because I think that like it was hard for her to not have a reason because she was kind of doing it on her own. So yeah, I think that for the sacral people, just making an effort to tune into your gut response and having the people around you give you options is such a powerful way to kind of like drop you into that connection.
Love it.
And it is so fun with clients who have this where they're just like, yeah, I really think I should do this because of this. I was like, that is not your gut speaking, at all. And so like you can go down that path, but like we'll know when your gut is like, this thing just feels right or it doesn't. The next category is what we call emotional authority. And this might say emotional solar plexus. This is possible for every single type, but reflectors. So this is what I am. And it basically means that you're not designed to make decisions in the moment, but you're meant to sleep on things and give yourself a moment before you commit. This is like for the big decisions in particular, because like when we're emotional decision makers, we are always riding an emotional wave, like highs and lows and highs and lows. And the most important thing is to not decide on the high or the low. I used to be very impulsive. And like whenever I was on a high, I was like, yes to everything, and then wake up the next day and I'm like, I have the energy for none of it. And so I would recommend the emotional people to just give yourself a beat. You know what I mean? Like I'm not saying indefinite, like 1, 2, 3 days. Like the minute you take space from a decision, like you start to see the full picture and like have a depth that you don't have access to otherwise. And so for you, while clarity comes in the moment, for us, clarity comes with time. And so you can imagine how useful that would be to understand the difference in partnership. Like my partner's like you, I'm totally need more time. He's like, let's do this. And I'm like, oh, tomorrow can we decide, And so just like having the language to understand that has been so useful. And especially again, with the people that you work with, like not pressuring those people to make decisions more quickly than is natural for them.
Yeah.
And one of the things I share about these people is if you're emotional, it also means that you project out your emotions and you're going to set the emotional tone of your space. And so it's good to be aware of that. So if you're on an emotional low, probably a better time to be more reclusive in your own space. So like, well, I project out my emotions. Kelly, you basically take in and amplify everyone else's emotions. So again, really useful to know the distinction between like you and your partner and like whether you're taking his, all the things, but those can be cool dynamics to look at.
Definitely.
Make sense?
I want you to do human design on Chris and then my work wife, Stephanie.
What's so crazy is that like, and maybe I showed you this in our session. I don't think that I did is like, you can look at an individual design. Obviously that's so useful, but then you can actually layer charts on top of each other and start to see like basically what is the dynamic when you come together? Where do you trigger each other? Where do you compromise each other? Where do you guys kind of activate new things? And then you can actually layer teams charts on top of each other and start to see kind of where the gaps are. So there's like, the insight is endless. And there's just so many pieces where it's like, it basically in partnership surfaces all the energetic stuff underneath the surface. So you don't you stop taking it personally and you just kind of understand it and have a language for it. So I love that. So then we have splenic people. This is only possible for manifestors and projectors. If you're a splenic decision maker, it is all about trusting your intuition in the moment. Intuition is different than the gut response. Gut response is a very visceral feeling in your belly. Intuition is just a quiet knowing. It's just like a whisper that you hear, like resonance with something or not. It is super spontaneous. So whereas I would tell the emotional people to take a moment, the splenic people, I would say, be super impulsive. As soon as you get that intuitive knowing, just make it happen. And for you, for example, like you've got that really strong intuition present within you as well, but you still kind of want to verify it by your gut response. Whereas for these people, it's all about kind of their intuition in the moment. The last thing I share for them is that the intuition is super quiet. So any practice you can develop to help you connect to your intuition and basically get quiet enough to hear it. Then we've got ego decision makers. This is basically making decisions based on whether or not your heart is in it, whether or not you have the willpower to do something, whether or not you really have the fortitude for it. I encourage these people to be very selfish in their decision making and kind of make sure that a decision really takes care of them. We have self-projected decision makers. This is only possible for projectors. The previous one was for projectors and manifestors. If you're self-projected, it basically is all about finding your truth by giving it a voice. So surrounding yourself by people that you trust and just talking things out. And like the minute you kind of talk, like your truth will literally just plop out and the tone of your voice will change. And so voice recording, therapists, journaling, really healthy practices for these people. We then have mental projectors, which is basically all about talking things out in different environments to kind of see what emerges for you. And finally, we have reflectors. They are what we call lunar authorities, and they're designed to give themselves a full 28 to 30 days before they make a big decision, which always blows my mind, but they've got to kind of sample something from so many different angles to know that it's correct. I know that is not always feasible to take 28 to 30 days. So my recommendation for you is just like, know that you have your own sense of timing, and check in if you feel like you're being pressured by the people around you and take as much time as you can. Maybe it's a week, so just kind of honoring the way you operate, even if you can't take that full 20 to 30 days. So Those are the authorities. And based on those, I'm curious, just because I only introduce yours when we talk, like now do you kind of like connect to that gut response even more, hearing all the different possibilities?
Yeah, definitely. Like I just think about even when we were in our Los Angeles apartment and we found mold and I was like, we're moving out. Like this is happening right now. And Chris was like, whoa, should we like get it tested? Should we talk to the landlord? And I was like, I'm pregnant. We have a 2-year-old. It's a neurotoxin. We need to move anyways. This is like the reason why this is happening. So we're moving. He was like, okay. And he's definitely more, I would love for you. I think he's an emotional decision maker. Just a little bit more, either that or he is the decision maker that needs to say it out loud, because a lot of his processing is like talking it out. And we'll talk about something for 2 hours where I can make a decision. Like I even just think about, I'm running the customer service of my protein powder right now and just trying to like understand it. And I think we talked about that, but someone will say like, the bag was broken or something's not working for me. And I'm like, cool, I'm going to refund you. Here's a discount code for the future. It's here. And then I'll talk to Chris and he'll want to talk about that situation that I just resolved for 20 or 40 minutes around like, well, should you offer this or should you offer that? And I'm like, I don't have time to really think about that. And this just, for some reason, this feels like the right response, and it is really interesting, but also I think really would be so valuable for me to understand, is he the emotional decision maker or is it about talking it out? Because that would probably give me more patience around just like spending 40 minutes, 2 hours, like hearing him say things until it feels right. Because there is a period of time that like he always has to sleep on things, it feels like, or he always needs to talk it out. So I would think that he'd be one of those too. But sometimes I think like with that process is I question, have I taken enough time to make this decision?
Yeah.
And so you validated for me. You validated for me that I don't need to wait, which is so silly, but it may be, sometimes
we need
like
that,
you just like not thinking about it, or you're not, what about the pros and cons? What about, should you sleep on it? And I'm like, no. Like, this is happening.
And we're just so often conditioned out of what actually works for us. Like the splenic people who are meant to be super spontaneous and you have that capacity to do it in the moment. They're like, oh, I've got to sleep on it. Isn't that like what I'm supposed to do? Or it's like, I'm emotional. I'm like, I want to be impulsive. I want to make it in the moment. And I think it's so interesting what you shared about this, the kind of talking things out, because I've done a lot of partnership sessions recently where one of them is that. And like, it's been a challenging thing in the relationship because like that person doesn't understand they need to like talk things out. So can you just like stop? You know what I mean? Do I really have to listen all the time? And not in a way that they're like not a good partner. It's more just like they're not always prepared to just hold that space for them, you know? And so I think having that as a framework has been so useful because instead of being like, they've been like, are you ready to listen right now? Because if so, let's do it. But like, if you're not ready to listen, go do your thing. So I think that my recommendation for the people that need to talk things out is when you're talking to somebody, remind them that you're not looking for an opinion and you're not looking for advice. You really just need the space to talk it out, but also being so intentional about kind of creating that space rather than just like launching into it.
So good. Yeah, definitely.
Do you want another layer?
Yeah, let's do another category.
Okay. So let's talk about profile. So there are 12 different profiles in human design, but they're made up of 6 different kind of numbers. So I'll just go through the 6 different numbers. So for example, Kelly, your profile is 3-5. I'm a 6-2. You might be a 2-4 or 1-3. So listen to like the 2 numbers that I share. So if you're 1-3, listen to the 1 and the 3. So let me talk about the 3-5 first. Actually, no, I'll talk about them all and then we'll talk about yours. So if you have a 1 in your profile, it basically means that you're very much here to be an expert and to like go really deep into the details of things. Like you really just like need to understand how things work and you've got to build like a very solid foundation in whatever it is you do. These are not people that are like, I did a certification over the weekend and like, I'm ready to teach. You know what I mean? They're like, I'm going to become the expert, and like build a really solid foundation and then I feel like I can stand on it and teach from that angle or teach from that place. And often there's a little bit of an insecurity associated with this one where it's just like, if they don't feel like they know enough yet and just know that insecurity is just like inspiration to know more. You know what I mean? Like I even think of my partner, like everyone around him called him an expert before he even did. He's like, I still have more to learn. Everyone's like, no, you know so much. He's like, not enough, So it's just like, there's such an investigative nature to these people. If you have a 2 in your profile, it basically is all about, rather than being the investigator, it's like doing what comes easy to you, doing like the things that feel the most natural. There's just like such a genius to you that you can't even explain. You might not know how you do what you do. You just do it. Often these people have a very natural hermit nature. So they love time alone to kind of just like cultivate their thing. This has been like the story of my life. And I think it really allowed me to step into it more because like I would get hired for things and they'd be like, I don't know, we just want you. And I'm like, but why? They're like, we don't know. And I'm just like, I just like couldn't understand it because I was like, I don't really have an expertise. I don't really have an authority here. So I think that for me, just like leaning into the things that have felt so natural and easy and like continue to cultivate that has been so empowering. You have a 3 in your profile. The 3 is a very naturally entrepreneurial one. So this one is basically all about learning through trial and error. You actually had such a beautiful example. So I would love for you to share this if you're comfortable, but in a second. But basically 3 is you're going to like bump into things and make mistakes and fail and learn. And like, you're not really meant to get it perfect the first time at all, And so the shadow, kind of the low expression for you would be like, I better get it perfect. I can't make any mistakes. And the wisdom is like, I'm going to bump it. I'm going to make a mistake. I'm going to learn. And like, I'm going to learn as much as possible from everything that I do. And having the people that have me around me that have this, I'm just like learn so much from them because they are such good teachers because they're like, I did all these things. I made all these mistakes and I'm going to save you so much time. Your personal journey and like personal wisdom is so impactful for other people. But the example I'm thinking about is the fund that you mentioned to your dad.
Oh yeah. The fund. Yeah. My dad's so I guess we could bleep this out. My dad, Papa B, my dad's, he calls it the fund. And I've talked about this before, I think on one other podcast, but it basically is just for the mistakes. like to keep you from not making mistakes. And they can be things like, I remember I had a custom website built for my business and then didn't realize that it was not mobily optimized. And when I started working with businesses and they were like, we're not going to link to your website, we'll link to your Instagram instead. But you're just not mobily optimized. It was like, okay, well, I'm going to take that $5,000 I just spent on a custom website with a designer, and I'm going to throw that in the fund. And I'm going to take a weekend and build a Squarespace website that's mobily optimized and move on. And I think it does that, like, allocation, that fund allows me to just go like, that was a mistake. I'm not going to dwell on it. I need to move on. And it keeps me moving instead of having me like paralyzed by the decision and feeling guilt and shame or regret around what I spent, whether that was time, money, or effort on whatever that was, and just moving on. And I think the hardest time for me in making that transition was obviously spending so much time in undergrad and then cultivating a career in cancer and genetics and thinking like, I'd already put so much time into this. I'm already so old and I'm already such, you know, like I'm managing a team and I'm leading people and like, why would I leave this? But it just to have that gut response of like, I don't know why I have to do this right now, or I like have to create this space for this right now, and trusting that I was going that direction. Like there have been multiple times throughout my career where I'm like, okay, we're just going to allocate this to this fund over here and we're going to move on, because it's like I'm down to fall and get up and make a bunch of mistakes and look like an absolute idiot, because you have to. I feel like I have to. Well, maybe other people don't, but I definitely like, that's how I keep my ball moving. It's how I keep my momentum. And they can like make you scared and make you hold back a little bit. But if you keep moving, you just move through it.
Exactly. You know, and I just loved your share last week because I was like, you just like, it feels like you own it, you know, and it just keeps making you better at what you do. And I think that like, and you very much more than other types necessarily, just like you learn by doing, you know, somebody's like, you know, this thing is cool. You're like, I've got to try it for myself. I'm going to fail myself and see if it actually doesn't work. And I also kind of call these people like the scientists of society, because they're just like discovering, as much as they're discovering what works, they're discovering all the things that don't work along the way, you know? And so owning that. So, and it's, you know, it's useful to know, say if your kid has this, you know, so again, like encouraging them to make mistakes, encouraging them to like do things and throw things against the wall and see what happens. And just like, what did you learn? Tell us what you learned, you know, and encouraging them to kind of like cultivate that resilience from a young age. Then if you have a 4 in your profile, so that basically means that your opportunities very much come through your network and the people that you know. And so these people are very kind of just like, it's good for them to work with friends, work with like partners, work with people that they have really familiar relationships with, and just to always kind of cultivate that network and relationship, because like you're meant to like find romantic partners that were friends first, you know, find jobs for people that were friends before. So just always cultivating that. Obviously that can benefit all of us, but it tends to be particularly potent for these people. If you have a 5 in your profile, so this is you, it basically means that you are very natural kind of problem solver, fixer, leader, kind of here to come in, offer solutions no one has thought of, and kind of like check back out. You're not really here to be like solving things all the time. It's like in, out, in, out. But also what we talked about last week is that, you know, people can project a lot of things onto you. It's like, you know, you can be this or you can be this. And like for you, your work is to be like, I love that you see that in me, but that's not me. You know what I mean? So to not kind of construct your identity based on what other people see, but to continue to kind of check in with your gut to be like, does this actually feel like me?
Yeah. That's why I love my 30s. Not my 20s. Well, I mean, it's fine. Like I love my 20s, but I do feel like there's a certain point of growth and maturity that happens where you can stand up and say like, I need to protect my time. This is me. I appreciate, because a lot of us can do a lot of different things and we can get pulled in so many different directions, and we can end up down a path of like, my dad thought I'd be good at this. And then my boss was really, you know, excited by my work. And then all of a sudden I was promoted and now I'm working at this company that I don't want to be at. And I've had that past where you're like,
exactly the shadow of 5. Yeah.
And now I can't leave it because of all these things and accolades and all of these people in my ear saying I'm doing a great job at it. But like, is it my calling?
Mm-hmm. 100%. You know, and it's such a beautiful example. I had a client recently who was like similar. Somebody was like, you'd be amazing at this job, like move across the country. She's like, okay, you think I'm amazing? Great. You know, and she's like, wait, that's not me at all. So it's like, it can feel positive, but it doesn't always mean it's true for you or right for you. The final one is if you have a 6 in your profile, basically means that you are a very natural kind of role model, teacher, advisor. People look to you as an authority. You care kind of an objective perspective, but often people live their life in 3 phases. This was very useful for me as a 6. Basically, the first 30 years is like a lot of trial and error, bumping into things, making mistakes. It's not a time to make a huge commitment. Like even my first human design business, like my business partner, I was 25. He was like, this is like, you're not going to stick with this. And I was like, no, I'm in forever, And then like 2 years later, I was like, I'm like launching my own practice. I was like a new thing, I was just like, I learned that like I was still so in that experimental phase, whereas 30 to 50 is kind of a time of more stability, commitment. And like, I'm actually meant to hit my prime when I turn 50. Doesn't mean for the 6 lines, there's anything to wait for. It's just like the wisdom gets deeper and deeper. So you just kind of embody it in a new way. So those are the profiles. Yeah.
Awesome.
So much.
I know, but it's really good because it's only the tippy top of the iceberg of like some of the things you can learn about yourself.
Yeah.
And understand how to use it, or at least be aware of like, what does the shadow or the dark side of that look like too?
Exactly. You know what I mean? Because in every layer of our design, there's the shadow and the wisdom, and at least being aware of it, we can like really check ourselves when we're moving into the shadow. Mm-hmm. Do you want another layer? Do you want to look at your design? What would be most useful?
What's the next layer? Let's see what it is.
The next layer, I'll do a small layer.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, the 2 layers that I think would be interesting is one is around the open centers, which maybe we could talk about if we reference your design at all, but also something called definition. So let me go through the definition, kind of how we process, because that's easy. So if you look at your definition, it will be like a single, split, triple, quad, reflectors or objectives. So this one is so useful in families, I find, and also, of course, with teams. But so you're a single definition, and it basically means that you're like a very independent, just like naturally whole kind of human, where it's like you probably really like to be in your own flow. Like you can kind of come in and out of teams, but like you just like, there's this natural wholeness where you just kind of like to do your own thing and you don't need to like be collaborating all the time, And I have found with people that have this, sometimes the people around them are a little bit more threatened by their independence. It's like, I want you to like need me more. And you're like, I'm kind of in my own flow. I'm good here, And so just like making sure that you honor that independence and don't make yourself wrong for it, and the people around you honor too.
And Chris and I have been together for so long. So I think that really helps. And we constantly are like trying to learn more about each other, which really helps too. But I can think about like specific friends that I have that I feel like may be sensitive to my independent nature, where I'm all in when we're together, but maybe I'm not the one texting and reaching out and being like, hey, how are you? Like, what's going on? And that's a lot, I can play the blame game and point to the fact that I'm like, I'm the breadwinner of my family and I'm the entrepreneur and I'm running my business with only like one person on my team. And I'm like really trying to just create change and do things and follow my gut, and then all of a sudden the day is gone and I'm like, oh, not that I'm not thinking about these people because they come into my mind all the time. It's just, I'm naturally less like, hey, oh my gosh, what's happening? How are you? Group text comes in. I'm all about it. Hey guys, what's up? But and then it tends to worry me a little bit because I know that I think my sisters and my mom and I are all a little bit the same in that way, or not all of us, but like my youngest sister, I think is this way. My mom is pretty independent. And so, I like days will go by and I'm like, oh my gosh, we haven't talked, or like, it's been just a little bit, but we're all still like really so close, but it's hard to explain,
Yeah. And it's something to be aware of like, okay, like maybe I need to like set the time to reach out because I'm going to be so content in my own flow. I might not be totally aware of it,
Totally.
And again, and doing it. And it doesn't mean that you like obviously aren't meant to be in connection and partnership, but it's like, it's not because you like need it in that moment in the same way. It's because you're like inspired to and it feels exciting, but like there's just like such a natural wholeness, self-contained nature to your energy. Whereas for some people, they're what we call split definition. So I'm split definition. So is my partner, but it basically means that you find wholeness through connection and collaboration with other people. So really interesting if you have like a split and a single in a relationship. And again, it's just like, it's not that one is right or one is wrong. It's just understanding how different they are. So it's like, oh, you need more collaboration. How can I create that space for you? Or like, how can I not make you wrong for your independence? So the split people, what I would say is just like, because you find wholeness through other people, if you're ever feeling stuck, being around other people is so useful. It doesn't always mean like, I've got to go have coffee with a friend, but like maybe I'll go to a park or a coffee shop or just go about be around other people's energy and like let that connect me in new ways. If you're a triple split, it basically means that you need a lot of freedom and movement. You've got to move your energy through lots of different groups and people throughout the day. So also so useful to know in relationships, because you might feel like, I feel so trapped with this person, and it's not because anything's wrong with that person. You just need so much more stimulation than you're getting in that one dynamic at that one time. And then there's quadruple split, which is basically around, taking a lot of time to digest things and really feel into things. And also knowing that the people around you are kind of meant to really adapt to you rather than you kind of really adapting to them. And then reflectors, it's good to kind of move their energy through lots of different groups of people and kind of places and environments. And again, not kind of get locked into one.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So just a taste.
Perfect.
But that's I think a very useful one. Again, knowing with teams, like one team, quick example is that they're all single definition like you, and they're like all in their own flow, and they've got one split definition. And he's always like calling them. He's like, "Can we talk about this? Can we talk about this?" And it was just like so useful to understand that, because he's like, "Oh, I see what's happening." But now people know that, and they can kind of respect that and create that space for him, rather than be like, "Why is he looking to collaborate in that way?"
Yeah, like pick up the phone. Hey, Bob. All right, I'm here for you. What's going on?
Here, showing up for it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. Well, let's jump into my human design, and you can maybe pull out a few things that were applicable, or what insights maybe we gathered from that other people might be able to gather from their own.
Yeah, perfect.
I'm going to be an open book right now.
You said you're being an open book?
I'm going to be an open book right now. Yep.
Well, it's always so fun because I'm, the people listening, you probably know a lot about Kelly or learn a lot. So it's just like, it's interesting to see how it shows up in this. So one piece that we haven't mentioned that I think is important to mention is that, there are areas in our design where we're very open and sensitive to other people's energy. And so some of the big ones for you is you have an open emotional center. So if you look at your chart in the very bottom right triangle is white, this will be true for you. It basically just means that you're like a hyper empath. You know what I mean? Like you not only feel other people's stuff, you experience it as amplified within yourself and often more intensive than they do. So if I walk in a bad mood, you're like, whoa, I feel terrible. It's like, or if someone's in a good mood, you're like, I feel amazing, And so much of your work is not taking on other people's stuff as your own and kind of treating what you're feeling as intel into the world around you. It's like, oh, like someone's going through a thing. It's not my thing to fix, but, I probably will be very good at giving them language for it and reflecting it back to them. Also, if you're in a room and there's like a lot of emotions, and you feel overwhelmed, one of the best things you can do is just give yourself physical space. Just like remove yourself and kind of come back to your own neutrality, because you're kind of meant to be like cool and calm and collected and lead from that very cool place. And so if you're amplifying a lot of stuff that's not yours, it can lead to kind of a high, just like a lot of emotions that maybe are not actually yours to begin with. Do you feel that sensitivity?
Yeah, no, I think we talked about this a little bit in that I definitely feel pretty even keeled most of the time, and I'm not emotionally charged by things. But when the people I care about become emotionally charged by things, I definitely feel that on a deep level. Specifically in 2020, looking at like the pandemic and the pain of that people were going through, and like loved ones were in the hospital, and I think about even following my friend Amanda who lost her husband, and then moving into Black Lives Matters and seeing lots of very emotionally triggering things, and especially when someone's like doing a live, or I just had to take physical space. My 2020 Instagram presence has not really been the best, and that has more to do with the fact that it's very hard to put something out on Instagram if you're not in the app itself. And it's been, it's just needing to be protective of that. And knowing the people in my family or my friend groups that tend to be glass half full or more positive, and really feeding off that energy, and then trying not to get sucked into the negativity, and being around those people is really important for me. And I know that.
Yeah. And I just it does mean that you've got to be kind of like a ruthless curator of your space in some ways, because you're going to feel it so intensely. And I'm actually not going to share an example because I want to share about your food really quickly. Okay. I know we talked about that. And I'll share a few more pieces if you'd like. But so we also all kind of have a unique digestion profile. And so a couple key pieces about yours is one that you are meant to eat more in the flow. So for you, it's not about I've got to get up and eat breakfast and lunch and dinner, whereas some people need that consistency for their brain and to operate well. You're very much I'm going to eat when I'm hungry. I'm going to drink when I'm thirsty. If I want to fast, I'm going to fast, So you feel like you do that, right?
Yeah, no, we talked about that it's really, that the timing of all of it, I'm definitely not someone who will wait till like 2 p.m. to eat or something, but like when the hunger hits, I'm known to like have lunch at 11 a.m. or known to have lunch at 2 p.m. And I'm not like, I'm a bad person because it was 2, or how come I couldn't make it to noon? Yeah. Like if I'm hungry, I'll just sit down and eat a meal.
Yes. Yes. So good. And also, your digestion is basically all around eating the same thing every day. And like, you're just meant to be a really picky eater and like highly discerning. Like you're not somebody who's like, you should try this thing. It's like, if you don't want to, then don't do it. It's like, and you'll know immediately whether or not it's for you. So I think just like, and it doesn't mean that again, you just like eat bananas every day, but it's more just like finding a balance of meals that you love and not forcing yourself to diversify if you're not inspired to.
Yeah. Which is why the 2020 Instagram content has been lacking, because it's basically been like, hi, I'm having a chocolate peanut butter Fab Four smoothie, or I'm having my spa smoothie, or I'm having egg tacos or an egg scramble. Right. So there are 4 pictures that I can post right now between, I don't know, when we moved here in May to now, and we're October. Yeah, tomorrow will be, May, June, July, August, September, October. Yeah, 5 months down here. Same food. Every day for breakfast, friends. That's how it goes.
Exactly. And it's so healthy for you, and also the other piece, I don't know if I mentioned this last week, but like if you're traveling, which I know is not really very possible in the time of COVID, it's just like bringing things you like. You know what I mean? It's like I just have like the tea that I love and the bars that I love and the things that I love. So it's not just like all foreign food that you've never tried, and food that so just like having that familiarity, that comfort, that consistency is so healthy for you. Also, another open center for you that's so interesting because it's more rare is that you have an open throat. If you're looking at your chart and you see that the third one down, I know some people are like, I don't know what a chart, and that's fine. Just like you can look at it after if you'd like, but the third one down, if it's white, you also have an open throat. And it basically means that your gift is not in the consistency of your voice, but in the fluidity. And so the shadow of this is basically not quite trusting that attention will come your way. And so feeling the need to like say something and express something and be like, I'm going to plan what I say. And I have no idea what's going to actually come out. And so much of your work is like sitting back and kind of waiting for the right timing and waiting to be invited in and not planning what you're going to say, because you've got such a gift for tuning into like exactly what needs to be heard in that moment. And it might not be like the same as what it was yesterday or the day before. So kind of embracing the fluidity of how you communicate. Do you feel that within yourself, that kind of fluid voice?
No, yeah. We talked a little bit about this on my human design call. Definitely like when I'm in the flow and when I'm calm and in the right space, the advice that I give is very true to who I am. It's it's from a place of confidence. It's relying on research, but making it applicable for people. I think when I get really worked up about something or I feel like it's a really big deal, the parts of me that would normally just like go with my gut and speak my truth, I will be more of a planner and I'll be more of a warrior and I'll be more, I'll put a lot more pressure on myself around that. And the pressure always creates an inauthentic presentation or something that feels very forced. And I don't think that I'm connecting with my audience or my client as much as I could be. And there are certain things that create that kind of pressure or anxiety that would make me feel like I needed to do more work or figure it out instead of trusting, like, you've done this for 8 years. You have a lot of research in your brain. You have a lot of practice, like real, like practice with actual clients that you can lean on to support this person and or this group of people that you're speaking to. So yeah, I think what you've given me is the permission to try to process the anxiety and stress without trying to over prepare because it creates an inauthentic presentation.
Yes, exactly. And knowing that like, while that pressure might be there, the work is to not react to it. It's like, I feel the pressure, I'm going to sit with it, and like wait for the inspiration or the invitation to come. I know we talked some about your channels last time. These are kind of your innate strengths, but just a few that I would mention quickly is like one of the strengths that you have is basically the strength of perfecting. it's just like perfecting anything that you're part of. And like so much of your design, honestly, is like being in your own flow and like making all these beautiful things and like kind of coming out of it. It's like, what happened? This is amazing, you know? So it's just like, you're just in this constant perfecting process of always making things better and leaving things like so much better than you found them. So it's just kind of like giving yourself permission to do that. You've also got the strength of focus where you can kind of still your energy in a really focused and precise way and go so deep in a process, you know? And I love that like the vortex and all the language you use around kind of doing that. And for you, because you've got so much tremendous energy, there can also be like a little bit of a restlessness or a little bit of a depression if it feels like there's nothing worthwhile to focus your energy on. Like for you, it's about like having a thing to like actually perfect and make better and create is going to be the thing that brings you so much satisfaction in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. We talked about this because I think it's really important if people are in a career and have that kind of, I guess the same profile as I do in this exact instant, maybe the perfecting one or just the same sort of combination is that when I look at my last career, everything was like quote unquote great on paper. Like, but I never felt like this major surge of like inspiration. It was very sporadic. It wasn't a constant flow of energy and it wasn't a constant flow of inspiration. And it wasn't like this drive to be better and continue to perfect that craft because it wasn't so true to who I am. Whereas like, this is like, I hate the word, but it's funny because perfection is part of my channel, but like, I hate the word perfection. It's
just like always improving.
Yeah. And so what I think is nothing needs to be perfect for me to put it out, but I'll just like even think about the courses that I've put out this year, Fab for Fundamentals in Pregnancy. And as I teach these classes on Zoom, like they have the videos and the downloadable PDFs, but as I like get to know these classes and the questions come up in Zoom, there may be like something where someone wants to literally see me use a glucometer, or they want to know like how they should be changing the way that they eat for postpartum, or what should their husband or spouse be doing or their partner be doing to like increase their sperm count. And I'm like, that's a great thing that I didn't think about for this course, but I can definitely create a PDF for that and add that in. And so it's like continuing to elevate without a need to like have it be perfect before it goes out, which I think can be like a really slippery slope for people if they feel like it needs to be perfect before they do it. And maybe that's like the expert, right? The person who
right.
Who's like,
I've got the authority.
I don't know anything. If I don't know everything, I'm not ready. And I feel very grateful that bone isn't in my body. I can definitely be scared by that and intimidated by those things. But to know that like I can always be better and always improve and always add. I think the abundance really supports action.
Yes. And it's also that learning by doing part where you're like, I'm not actually going to learn about what's missing until I actually put it out there. And then I'm going to learn all the things that are missing and add it, you know what I mean? And decide how to evolve it from there. So it is such a good distinction because that perfecting things is not about ever actually reaching perfection. It's about kind of just being in that constant state of improvement and making things better.
I feel like the drawback of that is like, is it ever really done? Question mark. Like there's that unending is it really, it's never really done. You're just iterating and iterating. But as long as something's out there in the world and making change and helping people, then that's all I can do.
Totally. Should I add one more?
Let's do one more. Yeah. Let's do one more and then we'll close it up and tell people where they can go get their human design and how they can work with you.
Okay. Beautiful. So the two channels I would share briefly about. One is you've got the strength of power. It's this beautiful ability in moments of crisis or moments of challenge to know exactly what needs to happen. And so much of the work for you is to get out of your head and into your body, be like, we've got to do this. You know what I mean? So there's just such a visceral kind of animalistic nature and beautiful way to your design where you just like know in the moment what has to happen. And also there's like this really kind of caretaking nature in your design where like you naturally probably take responsibility for things and like handle a lot of things, you know? And so I think for you, it's about trusting your gut to kind of know what to take care of and what to take responsibility for and making sure that obviously it requires that you take so much care of yourself before you kind of overextend. And also such a natural kind of guide for other people. But again, it all comes back to your gut to be like, am I actually available for this thing?
Yeah.
So those are my last pieces for you.
Yeah, I think when it comes to taking too much on, like being a natural caregiver or like being a decision maker and being able to make moves really fast from a gut response and be like confident enough to say like, I can handle this. It's definitely my Achilles heel of, like I said, spreading myself too thin, focusing on things that aren't my core, being pulled in different directions, putting a bunch of things on my plate, and then being like, am I an enabler, or am I like just doing something for someone else, but not really? It's just like constantly refocusing and constantly like you said, my oxygen mask before someone else's.
Yeah. And I think, again, it sounds like this year has been such a reminder for you of that. You know what I mean? But it's kind of trusting that like you create value, not by trying to make everyone around you happy and, you know, supporting them and all the things, but by being so connected to your own gut and your own convictions and honoring that and knowing that like that creates such a ripple effect for everyone around you. And so trusting that.
That's my 2021 mantra. I'm just going to be the big stone that's thrown in the lake and hopefully ripple.
100%. You're like, I'm going to be my own flow, and then I'm going to create all the impact just by doing that.
Yeah. So awesome. Erin, this was fun. I mean, I loved going through it with you, but I loved learning about the other types today and the other, like even from just their, you know, authority to definition to profile. I mean, there's just so many iterations, but you know, it makes me even more curious to get those loved ones that I have around me. I want to layer their human design on top of mine and just see where
it's so useful, where
our holes are and what we can learn. So we'll talk online. We'll talk offline about that. So where can people find you? Where can they follow along? How can they get their human design?
Yeah. Perfect. So I'm Erin Claire Jones everywhere. So I'm Erin Claire Jones on Instagram. My website is erinclairejones.com. And in terms of going deeper, you know, one of my most accessible offerings is something called the Blueprint, which is basically a 30-page written guide to your unique design that kind of walks you through all the key pieces, not in very jargony language, but very much just like kind of the things that you need to know. And it's kind of meant to serve as like an operating manual that you can just keep returning to. So we're doing a discount code for that. So the discount code will be Kelly, all caps. And the link is erinclairejones.com/blueprint. And then I also do individual sessions, partnership sessions, team sessions, group immersive workshops, all those things. And that's all available on my website and my Instagram.
Awesome. Well, we'll link to all of it in the show notes. And then hopefully everyone can get a deeper look into who they are. And I feel like this is a way more applicable tool than just like getting your astrology done or just something that feels, like you said, super cosmic or out there. This is like, hey, you can trust your gut. You do take on too much. Like this is you. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's been great just to know it and just tweak a few things even with Chris and I. Like, give me the options, babe. It's not that hard.
I know.
I'll make a decision quick.
Yes. And the last piece that I would share is that I think whether it's teams or romantic, we get so tripped up when we expect other people to be more similar to us or different than what they are. And I think what human design does is like, we're all wildly different. Let's give us the tools to kind of just like honor that in ourselves and in each other.
I love it. Thank you so much for your time,
Thank
Erin.
you.
All right.
Such a pleasure.
Take care, babe.
Thank you for listening to Be Well by Kelly. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Learn more at bewellbykelly.com and follow me on Instagram at bewellbykelly. I would love if you picked up my books, Body Love and Body Love Every Day. They're sold on Amazon and at all major booksellers.